Hello, Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity, and it's been a little bit since I've done any research on COVID. Not that it's not happening, but I think what I've said from the beginning is that it's going to take some time to really sort through everything that actually happened. There was a lot of sensationalism, there was a lot of emotion, and what we're seeing now is looking at the data through a different lens. And I think we will find that it pretty much says everything that we would have admitted that it said had we not been caught up in all the drama of the pandemic. And so this is a study out of Qatar. Qatar kept really good data throughout the pandemic. It's a younger population, but they have testing was pretty high level in there, so they kept a really good watch on everything. And so this was comparing, now this ran from July 1st, 2020, so like in the heart of the pandemic or shortly after it started, all the way up to November 30th of 2022, so almost a year ago, but really through the heat of everything that was happening. And they compared people who had an infection. Now granted, you have to survive the first infection to be protected against the next infection, but at some point a lot of people have been infected, to people who had the 2 dosage, the primary series, and then the third, the booster shot, so 3 series. I don't really know what we're up to now, but it compared those. So basically no shots or previous infection. It did not tease apart previous infection vaccinated versus previous infection unvaccinated. And so a couple take-home messages was that prior immunity really held out very strong throughout the length of this study. But we knew that. For some reason, we decided to throw that out with the window, or throw that out the baby with the bathwater, throw that idea out the window. But it was pretty strongly protective, upwards around 70% up until Omicron hit. Now, when Omicron hit, it dropped down to about 51% protection, but that's still a pretty strong protection. What we saw with both the vaccination primary series and the booster was that vaccination efficacy dropped off pretty strongly against infection. We knew that, not a big surprise. In all 3, so previous infection, 2 shots, and the booster shot, were protective against serious infection, hospitalization, and death throughout the course of it. Here's where things get a little bit, again, not new news, but Omicron in general was less severe. So we had less deaths, less hospitalizations to look at overall. So and we knew that coming out of Africa, out of South Africa, the data was suggesting that Omicron was not as severe. So if there were areas or people that experienced worse outcomes with Omicron, we have to start asking some really hard questions as into why. And the other thing that was very clear, and we've ignored this the entire time, was that the vaccinated population hit negative vaccine efficacy, meaning that in some cases, especially when Omicron hit, they were more likely to get infected. This is something that we're not having discussions about, even though the data has been there almost since the beginning of vaccination, that not only does it drop down, but it drops down to a negative point where those people become essentially magnets for becoming infected. Immune imprinting, whatever we want to call it, this data shows up consistently in the research. So what does this all mean? Is that, to the bottom line, the subject we have been avoiding for the entire length of time is that underlying metabolic health is still the most important thing to be focusing on, and it is still the last thing we're talking about. Exercise, diet, sunlight exposure, vitamin D, all of these things continue to play a critical role in our catching COVID and our outcomes with COVID. It is very clear. And from the beginning, we knew that, and we have not discussed this. Twitter is still a really very active place when it comes to COVID and all things masking and vaccination. And yet never do those same people that are pushing those interventions are not talking about improving metabolic health. It still remains the elephant in the room wearing ballet slippers and a tutu. So, as always, I'll post a link to this Qatar study in the description. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.